Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Hammer Horror in Order here on the All American Spook Show YouTube channel. I'm Josh and I'm joined here with Donnie
Yo.
and the Professor Smoke.
What's up?
As per usual with these things, Will couldn't join us. And if you listen to the All American Spook Show podcast, you'll hear his voice every now and then. Here lately, he's actually had some stuff come up and he's had some assignments, so to speak. So he hasn't been on as much here lately, but he trust me, there is four of us. He's the fourth guy. You'll hear him or see him every once in a blue. But yeah, so man, we're coming with a really big one here. Like this, the whole premise of this YouTube series is to literally go through the Hammer Films catalog specific to their horror movies and some of their like psychological thriller movies, and we're watching them in the order in which they came out. So the first two episodes that we've done over the last couple months, we talked about the Quatermass Experiment from 1955, also known as the Creeping Unknown. And then we most recently did X, the Unknown from 1956. So now we're finally to the point here where Hammer Films, or specific to what they became throughout the 60s and 70s, is one of the leading horror film companies in the world. This is kind of where it got started. Not kind of, this is where it got started with the Curse of Frankenstein from 1957. It was released May 20th, 1957 there in the UK. It didn't come out till about a month or so later here in the United States, June 25th of 1957. But by any measure, this thing was a total success. But we'll get into that here in a little bit. Smoke, I'm pretty sure I know your history with it, but Donnie, what about you? I mean, like, how long ago you think for you?
For me, I was probably about 10. Yeah, it's been a very, very long time since I've seen it, but I still love it. This movie's awesome.
Smoke, what about you?
Yeah, it's the last time I saw it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, but the first time I saw it, probably on TV, on like TBS or WGN or whatever, or USA, one of those stations.
We're not going to get into spoilers here. That's the kind of thing that we do over on the All American Spook Show, the regular podcast. So we're not going to go deep into spoilers, although we will point out a few things about the movie along the way here. But we always encourage you, no matter what, if you haven't seen this movie, go check it out. The original script title for the movie was Frankenstein and the Monster, but obviously they changed it to The Curse of Frankenstein. Either way, great title. Of course, it was made by Hammer Film Productions. The total runtime of the movie is 1 hour and 22 minutes. So, like a lot of movies of the time period, it moves pretty quick. It doesn't overstay its welcome or anything like that, I'd say. It was directed by Terence Fisher, who went on to become one of the leading directors for Hammer Films. I mean, he made Horror of Dracula, The Mummy, The Curse of the Werewolf. Unfortunately, he died in June of 1980 at the age of 76. And the movie was written by Jimmy Sangster, who we just talked about last episode of Hammer Horror in Order with X the Unknown, because he wrote that as well. So this is the second Jimmy Sangster written movie in a row that we're doing here. And he also went on to write a bunch of stuff for Hammer and other things too, with such as Horror of Dracula, The Mummy. Unfortunately, he passed away in August of 2011 at the age of 83, so he's no longer with us. This one, though, this is the star-making performance from Peter Cushing. Now, it's also cool for this one. It's the first, not only is it the first time we're seeing, a classic Hammer film with what turned out to be one of its big stars, but we get two of its big stars in this movie.
Yeah.
Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, who plays the creature. Specific to Peter Cushing, this is the thing that put him on the map, really, because I think before this, Peter Cushing was just kind of a British TV guy, not really, known in the film circles. He had been in some stuff, but not he hadn't had a big leading man role.
Yeah, he had actually mentioned in like interviews that he was looking forward to the kind of change of pace, because he was used to doing well, like TV when it was live acted.
This is not the first time that Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee were in the same movie, but this is the first time that they had interacted with each other, because apparently I think there was at least three other movies that they both were in but didn't like have a scene together, so they didn't really know each other until they did this movie. They start talking and become friends, and then as it turns out, they become lifelong friends. It also has Hazel Court as Elizabeth and Robert Urquhart I think that's how you say his last name, as Paul Crimp. Now, I read somewhere that like apparently whenever they sat down and I guess they premiered the movie, or maybe when it was he had his first chance to sit down and watch the movie, Robert Urquhart, he got up and was so mad at like this movie stinks. This is horrible. That he got up and left and then never did anything with Hammer ever again. I think, never worked with Terence Fisher or anything. Like, matter of fact, I don't think he ever did any horror movies, period, ever again after this. So, and the funny thing is, like, I think he has a really good performance.
Yeah, he
in this
does
movie.
really well in it.
Yeah,
And it's just
it's unfortunate that he felt that way, but yeah, he just walked away and never had anything to do with it again. Meanwhile, Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, they go on to do 1,000 Hammer movies and become horror icons. And
yeah.
who knows, he might have been one of those if he'd have stuck around, but he didn't appreciate it. So producer Max Rosenberg was the one that really approached Hammer Films with this project, and that they were going to make Frankenstein and the Monster. I guess that was kind of the original concept of what this was, right?
Yeah.
And that was from a script by Milton Subotsky. So apparently, at some point, Rosenberg and Subotsky were cut out of this movie altogether. Jimmy Sangster comes on and writes this script, based on the classic the classic Mary Shelley novel. But Rosenberg and Subotsky were cut out, and then they basically go on to form Amicus Films, which basically became Hammer's main rival throughout the 60s and the 70s, right, Smoke?
Yeah, they both had of course we know Hammer. We're talking about Hammer on this show, but Amicus had a lot of good titles themselves.
This movie actually went on to become, for years, the most profitable movie that was produced in England by a British studio for a long time.
That's crazy.
For best I can tell, it was done for a budget of about 65,000, I guess, pounds, which is somewhere around the equivalent of $270,000 US.
Mm-hmm.
And it went on to gross, best I can tell. These kind of numbers are, a little wonky when it's something from so long ago, but it went on to gross about $8 million. This particular one, Curse of Frankenstein, is really credited as like the one that kind of flipped horror back to what it was in the 30s and 40s, right, Smoke?
Yeah, and I think it probably can't be understated the fact of how important the drive-in was at this time in America.
Oh yeah.
I can't really speak for Britain. I really don't know what all Britain had going on theatrically, drive-in wise, or how important they were there. But over here in the States in the 50s, at this time, there was a renaissance of classic monster movies because the Universal monster movies from the 30s and 40s were being re-released in the drive-ins around this time as well.
Perhaps you had better start from the beginning.
Donnie, as far as this movie is concerned, what were your specific thoughts? I mean, we'll get into our whole consensus Hammer rating at the end, but what were your thoughts on the movie and anything in particular you want to point out?
Without I guess without actually spoiling
anything? without too many spoilers. We don't want to go deep ending specifically.
I mean, if you know the story of Frankenstein. It's set in the mid 1800s. Elizabeth came in. She came to the house or the castle or whatever, and she says, "Oh yeah, nice to meet you. I'm Baron's cousin or whatever." And so he says, "Yeah, we're cousins." And then like 5 minutes later, they're in a different section of the different scene, and then they talk about getting married. I was like, so that was I mean, I guess maybe in the 1860s nobody cared, but it was Paul's main, I guess, gripe with that is that they barely know each other.
Not that they're cousins.
Not that they're cousins.
Yeah.
How can you marry someone you barely know? Just like, wait a minute. They just said they were cousins.
We've discovered the source of life itself, and we've used it to restore a creature that was dead.
What do you think, Smoke, of the difference between, say, like Mary Shelley's story, the 1931 classic Frankenstein? What was that? James Whale that directed that one, right? And the differences between, because this is really a completely different take on that story, right?
Yeah, it's really all three of those are completely different takes from each other. I mean, Mary Shelley's original novel, the 1931, was that what it was?
That James
1930.
Well, yeah, that was 31, I believe.
James Whale, was vastly different from that novel. I mean, it of course has similarities in certain scenes and things, but I mean, really vastly different. This movie also different from from James Whale's and different from the novel. So it's cool. I mean, if you're looking for something to be spot on with a novel, you're not going to find it in James Whale's or in Terence Fisher's movie. But that being said, I appreciate it for that, because I like that they didn't just try and copy either the novel straightforward or to copy James Whale's movie. It's their own thing.
I read somewhere that Jimmy Sangster purposely stayed away from even watching. I don't think he had watched, the 1931 classic, and he didn't want to, because he didn't want that to influence his take on the story.
Which is good. I appreciate it for that, because it's two totally different movies. You can enjoy both without it being samey at all.
Overall, I think it's a great watch. It sets the stage, like I said, for not only just later Hammer films, but just it's a vastly good, different take on the Frankenstein story. So, like, even if you've watched the old classic or you've watched some other version of it, this is probably different from every other version you're going to watch of the story. So I appreciate it for that, and it was a great flick, and it actually spun, however you want to put it, at least 6 other sequels later on from Hammer. They did The Revenge of Frankenstein in 1958, so I'm sure we'll get to that one very soon. The Evil of Frankenstein in 1964. Frankenstein Created Woman, 1967. Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, 1969. The Horror of Frankenstein, which that one was actually the only one, I believe, without Peter Cushing, in 1970. And then in 1974, Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. So that was all the ones that, kind of came out of this one. And really the only connecting thread, obviously there is a Frankenstein, there's a monster, but I think it's a different monster every time. It's not like, oh, here's that same monster again. And then there was the whole side of it where Universal wouldn't allow them to do their version of it. So they had to completely, that's why Christopher Lee's creature has such a different look than what we're used to, with the bolts out of the neck and the flat head of Boris Karloff in the, of the monster in the original from 1931. We all came together beforehand and we gave our own individual ratings. Now, I will say we do a Hammer rating scale for these Hammer Horror and Order movies. So this scale is a little different. It's still 0 to 5, but instead of stars, we give out hammers. And it's a little bit more of a skewed rating scale compared to, say, like, we're not comparing this to Godfather, right? We're comparing this to other Hammer movies and, movies of this type. So with that being said, all of ours together, we came up with a rating out of 5 of 4 3/4 hammers. So
highly recommended.
Yeah, highly recommended. There's definitely wiggle room there to say maybe one day we find another Hammer movie that we like just as much, if not more, but this one's going to be really high up for all of us. So I think we're just going to leave it there for the Curse of Frankenstein, and hopefully we get to this on the regular podcast so we can take a deeper dive into some of the background, because there's a lot more we didn't talk about here today. Give kind of our spoilery thoughts and everything so we can really talk about the movie and the way it ended and everything. So hopefully sooner or later we'll get to this on the regular podcast, but for now we'll just leave it there. But next time here on Hammer Horror and Order, the 4th edition coming at you next month, we're going to go back to the old science well again. Quatermass 2 from 1957, also known as Enemy of Space, which came out in May of 1957. So back to that Quatermass experiment, X the Unknown side of Hammer films before we get back into some of this type of stuff a little bit later on. So we've got that to look forward to. So I guess really that's it here for this month on Hammer Horror and Order. So for Will, who couldn't join us, Donnie, Professor Smoke, I'm Josh. We're from the All American Spook Show podcast. We encourage you to go over to our website, aaspookshow.com. That's the center of the Spook Show universe, so you don't miss a thing. So we'll see you next month.